Welcome, friends, to Breakfast in the Ruins, a Michael Moorcock-flavoured podcast. On this show, I'm delighted to welcome back Mateo Latosa, the mastermind behind the Powysverse of Space 1999 fiction. Regular listeners will recall that last year, Mateo joined me for the first time to talk about the mammoth task he and his colleagues undertook to compile, revise, and refresh the 1970s Space 1999 novelisations, bringing them into line not only with each other in terms of series continuity, but also bringing back the original authors to collaborate on the project, authors like E.C. Tubb, John Rankin, Brian Ball, and Michael Butterworth, two of those also being authors we've covered on Breakfast in the Ruins, but also plugging gaps where novelisations didn't exist with the helps of writers William Latham, Rupert Booth, and Patricia Sokol, and Mateo himself, of course, and then going on to publish a new range of Space 1999 fiction that plugged the gap between Series 1 and 2 and extended it well beyond. An incredible undertaking that produced two magnificent hardcover volumes, Year 1 and Year 2, the Powysverse Compendium, and a host of newer novels that expanded the story beyond the TV show. When we spoke last time, we considered the possibility of picking one of the original 70s novelisations and diving into it to talk about the adaptation, the TV episodes it was based upon, and the process of revisions and realignments for the Year 1 omnibus. And Mateo chose the third of the original run, Brian Ball's The Space Guardians, a novelisation of the episodes Missing Link, Force of Life, and The Guardian of Piri. But who was Brian Ball? Well, he was an academic, a theologian, and a prolific novelist, with over 90 published works over 4 decades before he passed away in 2020 in Doncaster at the ripe old age of 88. I wonder what the epic and ridiculously massive encyclopedia of science fiction says about Brian. In a fight between Space 1999 Year 1 and the Clute and Nichols Encyclopedia of SF, I'm honestly not sure which one would win. They're both absolute bruisers. But anyway, let's have a look. Ball, Brian Neville, UK writer, until 1965 a teacher and lecturer, subsequently freelance. He began publishing SF with The Pioneer for New Worlds in 1962. Oh well, there you go, New Worlds, although probably a little bit before Mike's tenure as editor. Anyway, he also edited a juvenile anthology, Tales of Science Fiction, in 1964, and the next year published his first novel, Sundog, in 1965, one of his better books in which, though restricted by aliens to the solar system, mankind in the person of space pilot Dodd transcends its limitations. There followed a trilogy involving an ancient galactic federation, its relics, time travel and rebirth, Timepiece, 1968, Time Pivot, 1970, and Time Pit, 1971. A second series, The Probability Man, 1972, and Planet Probability, 1973, follows the exploits of frame director Spingarn in his heterodox construction of reality spaces for the delectation and voluntary destruction of billions of bored citizens. Though he sometimes aspires to the more metaphysical side of the SF tropes he utilises, Ball's style tends to reduce these implications to routine action-adventure plots, competently executed. Well, faint praise is better than no praise, I suppose, but enough of the encyclopedia for today. We have a long episode ahead of us. So, slide into your shreddies, join us in the solarium, as we try to ignore the inky blackness of the void between the stars and take a look at the Space Guardians. Well, we're back in Derry Toms, and I'm quite delighted to say that we have a returning co-host, and it's Mateo. Welcome back, Mateo. Lovely to see you again.
Good to see you.
It's smashing to have you back. I have this Space 1999 Year 1 omnibus on my desk at just about all times, basically laughing at me because it's almost too big to pick up and read without breaking my wrists. I still haven't bought a lectern to put it on, but I fully intend to do so one day, so I can sit church style and just leaf through it page by page. But when we had our conversation last time around, when we were talking about your work around Space 1999, we actually did have a conversation. I can't remember whether we had the conversation during that episode or whether we had the conversation a little bit later when we said that, you know what, we should actually look at one of the novelisations, look at the episodes behind it, and then talk about the work that you did to bring it into some level of internal consistency and to do all the things that you did with it in Year 1. So here we are. So I put the pitch out to you that we crack on and do this and get a date in the calendar, and you chose The Space Guardians. Why the Space Guardians?
I think it's because I had a bigger role in writing it or rewriting it. And because I think Brian Ball, what he did, he tried to write a novel in which these three stories were parts of the novel, but they were very much interconnected. And that was very much what we wanted to do with the entire series. And also because the first story, Missing Link, was written starting from the novelization and then bringing in the transcript of the episode as aired. The second story was written completely ignoring the novelization and just starting from the transcript alone. And then the third was started writing an episode based on the, writing a novelization based on the transcript and episode, and then bringing in the original novelization and building it back in. So it was three different approaches, and I thought it might be interesting.
Well, it certainly was interesting because some of the little bridging sections, which tie this into one overall, because even with those bridging sections and with those little bits and pieces, it's still very obvious when you read it, a fix-up novel of 3 episodes. But the job that Ball does on actually connecting the dots between the episodes and also changing some elements, or certainly changing some elements as you would think if you were to watch the TV show versions of these episodes, are quite neat in the fashion in which he does them. And we'll talk about some of those things as we go along. So this was published in 1975 in Great Britain. This was most likely published before the TV series even made it onto ITV, I'm guessing, because they were filmed in 74. I think they filmed the final episodes in early 75. This is published in 75. I don't think I was even watching these on TV until I was a little bit older, of course, because I was only 3 years old in 1975. So I'm guessing a lot of people were reading these before they even had a chance to see them on the TV in the UK.
That I don't know. I know that it aired in September of 75.
Yeah.
I think the books, I don't know if they were published before it aired, but I do know that they were published rapidly once it started. You know, I think the 75 is that they were written before the series aired. I don't think they were published.
Right. This one just says first published in GB 1975 by Futura. So I don't know. I'm just going by the inlay. Copyright Brian Ball 75. So it must have been written in 75. But it's always fascinating reading novelisations of things. We've done a few. We've done Blake's 7 novelisations, and it's plainly obvious that they're based upon shooting scripts rather than finished broadcasts. And there are some fantastic examples in here, particularly in the last third in where the episode Guardians of Piri takes place. The descriptions of Paul Morrow, are all about him having massive meaty hands, a huge bulk, a massive head. Right. And whereas in the TV show, his chief attributes are a fantastic moustache and a nice head of hair. So yeah, the descriptions of him in here are very, very different. But tell us a little bit about Brian Ball, because of course you had a relationship with him. You know, sadly he passed in 2020, didn't he? But he wrote the foreword for your huge Space 1999 Volume 1 edition.
Well, I met him in 2005, I believe. In 2005, I had already contracted with licensing the original books. And I went to a convention of the prisoner at Port Merion. Yeah. And I stayed with Michael Butterworth at his home. But I went to spend a couple of days at Brian Ball's home. He invited me down. He was very gracious. His wife, Elizabeth, wonderful, wonderful woman. Of course, I was nervous and everything, but they were very, very nice to me. So, I mean, I got a chance to meet him. Sadly, not sadly, the book took longer to get done than I had initially intended. About 15 years later, it got published. But I am happy to say that when it got published, I sent a copy and it was given to Brian Ball. And he was in, at that time, like a nursing home type facility. Yeah. And his wife was saying, she communicated to us that he was very proud of the book. He was showing it off to all the other people that were there and to the staff. And, you know, it was, in a sense, his last published book, you know, during his life. And he was very, I mean, I think everybody's surprised at how massive this thing is. And,
I certainly was when it arrived.
And so, his name was on it, and he was very pleased. And I was very happy that it got to him. He died soon after that, a month or two after that. So I was very pleased that he got it in time.
Yeah. According to his wiki, he wrote over 90 novels, which is quite a remarkable output. So he must have been one of those working novelists, those artisanal novelists that Britain produced in the 50s, 60s and 70s, who really, really turned out a huge, huge volume of writing. Yeah. I think this is, as I say, I've read a lot. As a kid, often because we had 3 TV channels, one of which was half time, which I think is probably baffling to people in the USA. But yeah, 3 TV channels, one of which was half time in the 1970s. And if you missed something on the TV, it would never be repeated. There were no VCRs. So the only way you could possibly experience a lot of this stuff was novelisations like this, novelisations of there were only ever 4 at the time, Blake 7 novelisations. And this, of course, was one of 6 in the original run. The only one that Brian Ball wrote, I think.
Yes.
And this was the 3rd. I need to send you a picture, actually. A while back, I got some of the first edition hardcover editions of these. Not the Space Guardians, sadly. That one seems to be very, very hard to obtain. But I've got the first 2 and the last 2. So the first one is E.C. Tubb. The other 3 are John Rankin, I think, from memory.
Tubb wrote 1 and 4, and Rankin wrote 2, 5, and 6. Yeah. Remember, they also continued, because the publishing companies have the contract. Tubb and Rankin both wrote 2 original novels as part of that original publishing.
Yes, I've got the hardcover of Tubbs. Is it Space Seed, Alien Seed? I can't remember the exact title of it, but I've got it kicking. Alien Seed. I've got that kicking around somewhere. Now I've read these, I'm going to have to read that and give it a look. Maybe that's one for the future where you and I can just cover that as an episode. I was only thinking the other day, is there a Space 1999 podcast out there? And there are a couple. Otherwise, I'd have been tapping you up and saying, let's just do a Space 99 podcast and work through everything. But you know what? I don't think there's enough hours in the day for me to be able to do that. But I would love to do that one day, perhaps, when I retire.
On our website, if you ever want to check it out, there is a chronology. And all of the short stories, original novels, and episode novelizations are all there in a internal universe chronology. So you'll see where Alien Seed takes place. It takes place in year 1, before Collision Course, somewhere in there.
Yeah. I'll put a link to that in the show notes because it's a terrific resource for people who are Space 1999 fans. And of course, Ball returned and actually wrote one for Powys Media, didn't he? He wrote Survival. Which answers the question of what happened to Professor Bergman.
Yes.
Oh, well, you know what? I've not read it. I'm tempted to ask. But maybe we should save that for another time so we don't spoil it. I don't know.
It's the one book I have numerous copies in a box.
Really? Oh, I'll tell you what, I'll buy one off you.
Yeah. When we did the second edition of that book, we went through and corrected a bunch of typos and things. And so we pulled it out of circulation. So I wound up with a box of I think I have about 45 of them sitting brand new in a box.
Well, if you're up for it, I'll buy one off you, and at some point in the future, maybe we'll take a look at that as well. Yeah. So let's talk about the stories that are in here then, because the first one is The Missing Link. And the first thing I realised when I wanted to watch these, I realised that my Blu-ray box set was hidden away at the back of a cupboard or in a box somewhere, and I couldn't find it anywhere. So I went online and I got a free 7-day trial with ITV Plus. So I could actually watch these episodes. And I watched them last night with my wife, Phil. And the first thing that occurred to me was, despite the fact that in this book they're in a nice tidy order, and that order is repeated in year 1, the Powysverse year 1 omnibus, on the ITV listing, Missing Link is episode 19, Force of Life is episode 2, and Guardian of Piri is episode 11, which is kind of baffling because that's not the order they are in the Blu-ray, for a start. And it's also not the order they appear in the Destination Moonbase Alpha unofficial unauthorized guide as well. I think they're in shooting order in here. So that was quite confusing.
The accepted order is generally the production order because it wasn't technically a serialized program. And so the television station aired them in whatever order they thought, this episode they decided to do that one. And the aired order makes no sense. It just doesn't make any sense. And so we followed the production order. It's actually a point I wanted to discuss because we followed the production order, but we messed with it a little bit because in production order, it's Missing Link, Guardian of Piri, and then Force of Life. And Brian Ball chose Missing Link, Force of Life, Guardian of Piri, and we did the same thing. Now, his reasons may have been different. He may not have known. They were just the scripts that he was given. But we made a choice that there would be a planet, solar system related story, an interstellar story, then another planet. So you weren't going, solar system, so quickly. And so that's why we switched it. But it turned out to be exactly the same order he had put them in. And it wasn't very different from the production order. It was just the Guardian of Piri and Force of Life switched places. But other than that, that was the order we chose.
I think it makes a degree of sense. But because at the end of, we'll get into the details of these stories a little bit because people will listen to us going, what the fuck are they talking about? Right? Unless they're really familiar with these episodes. And some people might not have read them or seen them for years. But I think it makes a degree of sense because at the end of the second story, they kind of the moon enters into a gulf in space. And that would have been a little bit weird if it was normal interstellar space, gulf in space. I don't know. Whatever happens, Brian Ball made it work. And I like what he did with it. So the first one up is The Missing Link. And there are a couple of details, but in the novel, Koenig, Carter, Bergman and Sandra have an untoward incident in an Eagle whilst checking a moon crater for minerals. They all get injured, but Koenig is left with negative life signals, in inverted commas, which introduces a moral conundrum for Moonbase Alpha's medical team, Helena and Matthias. But the problem is John's consciousness and soul have been hijacked by an alien from a nearby world who's a member of an ancient, incredibly advanced race, which is quite a common trope in any kind of science fiction, but particularly there's a lot in Space 1999. But on this occasion, this fellow is an anthropologist with a very hot daughter. Cue trippy experiences for Koenig as the anthropologist Ran conducts a series of psychological experiments involving the Alpha crew, a hot alien babe, his daughter that tries to tempt him to stay on the planet Zeno as an anthropological specimen, but with the fringe benefit of that hot babe to keep him company. I can't say I'm entirely convinced by the love story in either the episode or the novelisation, but hey, it's shorthand, isn't it? And a huge decision has to be made by Dr. Russell back aboard Alpha about what to do with him. And it's, I think you mentioned that this is an episode that gets probably an unfair level of stick, but in terms of the story, I think it seems a little bit like a conventional Space 1999 story. I think it's well written. But the TV episode actually, I think, transcends the novelised version for a couple of reasons. There are a few differences. One is that first experiment where he wakes up on Alpha and Bergman, and he's talking to Bergman, and Bergman's all doom-laden. So they put him through this series of experiments where they send him back to Alpha, but the people on Alpha aren't being quite normal or correct. And there's this fairly interesting scene with Bergman, and it's in the TV show as well, where Bergman's a bit shitty with him and very negative about the future, and it's all very cynical. But in the novel, of course, it's much extended. It involves this bit with them finding a crashed alien ship on the moon, which I think is a sort of reference to another episode, right?
E.C. Tubb killed off Commissioner Simmons in Breakaway. And so when the episode Earthbound was written, and I don't know in which order it was written, Commissioner Simmons is alive. And, Christopher Lee playing Xantor, Captain Xantor, their ship comes to the moon as a stopping point before going to Earth. But because the moon's flying through space, it followed the moon because it was programmed to go to the moon first. That script was never novelized because they killed off the character.
Because Tubb killed Simmons.
Right. So I think that script may have been given to Brian Ball as one of his 4. But then he was told, you know what, you just have to ignore this one because Tubb killed off the character.
Right,
so
okay.
He's going to let it go. But he thought that let me take as much of this story as I can and transform it into a ship that crashed on the moon centuries before and use that as the thing that Bergman talks about. So that's what's built into Ball's book. Ultimately, that whole story was told. It was novelized by Patricia Sokol, and it takes place as episode 3.
Right, okay. So in year 1, you've actually amended the death of Simmons to have him alive for Earthbound.
Right.
You did so much work on this stuff. It's absolutely incredible. Now, watching the episode, there obviously are the differences that we'll mention on, but largely it's quite on beat with the novelisation. But the thing that really, really struck me, and it always strikes me every time I go back and rewatch Space 1999, is just how well directed they are. Obviously, we know they've got the beautiful sets. We know it was one of the most expensive. I think it was the most expensive television show ever made at the time, wasn't it? Is that right?
Could have been.
I'm sure it was. Yeah. And the sets are fantastic. The special effects, the model work, everything was so massively ahead of its time. But these TV directors that they got, who were really journeyman TV directors who worked in a wide range of TV shows, the level of craft that they demonstrate in these episodes is absolutely astonishing. So this one was directed by Ray Austin, and Ray was a journeyman TV director who worked on loads of shows. He was a seasoned stuntman. I think he was in Spartacus as a stuntman. But prior to this, I looked him up, and prior to this, he'd had this wonderful run of doing quite accomplished exploitation garbage. He'd done The Virgin Witch, Dr. Maniac, and a film called 1,000 Convicts and a Woman.
I'd never heard of that.
Straight away, it conjures up, oh my God, what is this? But actually, when you look up the reviews of it, it actually sounds like quite a fun and interesting exploitation garbage movie. But all the reviews of those films say that he elevated those films due to his craftsmanship as a director. Well, he brings all the tools to this show, doesn't he? Soft focus lighting, actual lighting. One of the things watching and consuming lots of modern television is you forget about things like the visual craft around use of shadows and creative camera movements. Oh, it's got it all. It's got it all. It's absolutely fantastic. And when I was a kid, I remember watching Space 1999 on a Saturday morning. There is no way they would have shown this on a Saturday morning, because the scene in which there's another psychological experiment and Koenig is being menaced by a man with an exposed brain who looks like he's been experimented on. Absolutely fantastic practical makeup effects. And he gets accosted by these human experiments from his subconscious, and he wakes up screaming with a look of abject terror on his face. Absolutely wild scene for a family sci-fi show. But that's not in this book, is it?
No, it was not in the novelization, no.
Yeah, so they actually created that for the shooting script. Oh, remarkable.
Which is actually a detriment to the novelization, because essentially there's only one experiment.
Yeah, there's one experiment and a lot of philosophical kind of musings back and forth. Not that I'm against that. Black Sun is one of my favourite episodes, and that's almost 80% philosophical musings. But it is properly bummed out. But it's a great example of how this show at its best is a philosophical sci-fi horror hybrid. And 2 of the 3 stories here are basically sci-fi horror hybrids. And
once again, I just make it clear that, if the other experimental scenes, where Koenig is being experimented upon, are missing, it's probably because they weren't in the draft script that was given to Ball. Not that he didn't put them in.
I sometimes wonder if they were stuck to a word count. I know we found with one of the Blake 7 novelisations, I can't remember which one, might have been Project Avalon. There were 4 episodes in that novelisation, and 3 of the episodes account for about 90% of the page count. And then the 4th episode is done and dusted in 10 pages, like he either ran out of time, ran out of passion, ran out of allotted page count, or whatever it was. I don't know. Yeah, maybe Ball thought he could accomplish it without the use of that scene. We just don't know, do we? At the end of the day,
yeah, I don't know, but I don't think so. And your point is true in this book, because there would have been 4 stories. It's the only book with 3, and Guardian of Piri is like double length. Yes. The one at the end is like double length. Yeah. And E.C. Tubb did the same thing. He wrote the novelization Collision Course, and the first episode is so long that when he finally gets to the final one, it's done like in, I believe, 12 or 14 pages. Whereas John Rankin, pretty much 1/4, 1/4, 1/4, 1/4.
Right.
He was careful. He gave each story the page count that it needed. But as for, there was a limited page count. I don't know. I'd have to ask the agent, although he wasn't their agent at the time. But even as a child, I noticed that all of these books are 159 pages.
Yeah.
That is beyond coincidence.
Yeah.
I mean, there may be 1 or 2 difference, but I don't think I ever saw the number 160. At least now the UK version may be different because the type was much smaller, but in the US version, they were very uniform in length. And if you see them on the shelf, they're also very uniform. And I think there was a word count limit.
It definitely seems to be the case, especially for mass market paperbacks of SF and fantasy type in the 60s and 70s in the UK. It is very strange how they all are so closely tied together page count wise, which is one of the reasons why this podcast, we kind of sniff at the idea of doing anything over 150 pages. I think, oh no, that'll be too much like hard work. Yeah, but it is it's a truly bombed out episode, and there's another good example when, in an attempt to display how Koenig is the glue that binds the crew of Alpha together, when he's incapacitated and perhaps on the verge of death, there's a moment in the TV episode where Kano is a complete arsehole to a female team member who spills a bit of coffee, and he nearly comes to blows with Paul Morrow as a result of it. And that precedes a scene where we cut straight to Doctors Russell and Matthias giving Koenig electroconvulsive therapy. And the way it's filmed and shot, it looks brutal and horrific. It's absolutely incredible for a family sci-fi show of the time. But in the novelisation, it's also, it happens in the novelisation as well. And unlike in the TV show, Paul actually objects to it. I'm just going to read a little bit, which is quite remarkable. This is He was watching Paul Morrow struggle with indecision. The big screen in main mission control filled with light, then settled. Koenig could see Helena Russell, and beyond her his own long frame, because of course Koenig is witnessing this from the perspective that the aliens are giving him. "What are the chances, Dr. Russell?" said Morrow. Helena Russell pushed her long blonde hair back from her face wearily. "The fracture can be treated. The rest is superficial. But how can I give a medical opinion about that?" She pointed to the registers that showed no life activity. "I'll try revival procedures." She indicated to the assistants what she required. "What's Professor Bergman's opinion now?" asked Morrow. "What it has been from the first," Bergman said. He approached the scarce-breathing body. "We're faced with a paradox. John Koenig is neither dead nor alive. Apparently there has been a cessation of electrical activity throughout the nerve centres, yet he breathes. It's so unnatural as to be unbelievable. I'm convinced that he is affected by some external agency which we can't investigate because our computer can't begin to define it." He looked down at the glittering electrodes on the shaven head. "If I were a superstitious man, I'd say that his soul had been stone." "That's nonsensical," Morrow snapped angrily. But Helena Russell was already speaking. Morrow stopped to listen. "I'm reinforcing the charge by 2 more electrodes over the heart, Victor." "No, I'll do it," she told her assistant. When they were in place, she looked up at the screen. "Victor isn't being fanciful," she said. "If it's a spell, we'll break it." "Oh, John," said Morrow. His voice was loud in main mission control. "I can't authorise this, Dr. Russell. It's the crudest kind of treatment. Damn it, Helena, shock therapy is an archaic and discredited form of treatment. You even said yourself there's an odds-on chance you'll kill him, and I won't permit it. I'm in command now, and I say—" Kano snarled. "You'll say nothing, Morrow. If there's any decision to be made, Dr. Russell will make it. You're not the commander of Moonbase Alpha any more than I am." Morrow swung round furiously. He was faced with something he could understand. Outright opposition could be dealt with, whereas the eerie thing that had happened to John Koenig left him dismayed and helpless. His fists balled. Appalled, John Koenig returned to Savannah. "They're falling apart," he said slowly. "It's going to wreck Moonbase." Instinctively, he ordered Morrow to calm down, but Morrow couldn't hear. Koenig realised that his presence at Moonbase was only a projection sent across the continuums to watch his own death. Gritting back the angry words, Koenig heard Helena Russell say, "I make this decision, Controller Morrow." Paul Morrow's anger ebbed. Helena Russell nodded to her assistant. "Half power," she said. There was dead silence in the diagnostic unit. Then Koenig saw his own shaven head jerk once, twice, as the power surged through his inert body. A sympathetic shudder raced along his spine. Vanna clutched his hand. "Well," said Paul Morrow. Helena Russell's blue eyes were fixed on the lifeline readings. Momentarily, the red electric lines began to creep upwards. "Raise it 3 points," she said. "He can't stand that charge," Kano called. "I can't leave him like this. He's dead. A zombie," Helena said bitterly. The assistant hesitated, then looked at Morrow. "Raise the level," said the controller. Koenig saw the shaven head jerk again, then it slumped back, eyes open and unseeing. Vanna wept, and then Koenig sensed the power she began to exert. Space bent, light years flashed past. The diagnostic unit faded and merged into a rushing purple void. There was an echo of Helena Russell's low sigh, and then Koenig saw the strange towers of Zeno form about him. "That's quite wild stuff," isn't it? They've shaved his head. They're giving him electroconvulsive therapy. They're having arguments. And I never really realised, and I kind of forgot, just how often there's tension between Morrow and Kano. And it's not until you watch them again and the smaller characterisations of the other members of the crew, which incidentally I wish would have seen more of in season 2, are just, they really, really flesh out these characters. And the novelisation, there's lots more of it as well, which is terrific.
Very
good
true.
Stuff.
And very well written. I have to say that all of the writers bring their talents to what they do, and they take it seriously, and they don't just do it to earn a paycheck. They all they give it their best, I believe. I said to Phil Harbottle that I felt that Brian's writing was, in a sense, poetic. It really had a sort of poetry to it, that in terms of the description and the characters, his prose. I was very pleased when Brian Ball decided to write an original novel for us, because I was impressed by his writing style. And it stood out because of the 10 original books, he only wrote that one, but it always resonated. And he was given 3 really, really good episodes.
Well, you know, we'll talk about rating these episodes as we go along as well, I reckon, because I was looking at the ratings that they were given in Destination Moonbase Alpha, this unofficial guide by Robert E. Wood, and I think he's pretty much on the money, to be honest. But we'll do our own rating system, I think, when we get there. While Koenig is flirting like mad and smooching Peter Cushing's gold, massively bonneted alien daughter, we've got to talk about the book description of Rana. It's not really matched by the TV show, and it's one of the more bizarre makeup choices on the show. She has this wild, like, huge headpiece, and she's painted all in gold. And it does make the love story between them just a little bit weird and a little bit hard to swallow. But that said, Peter Cushing doesn't really match the characterisation of Ran either, because in the book he's described as young, taller than Koenig, and he's a little bit of a knob as well. You know, he's a little bit brutal in his treatment of him, and he's dismissive, whereas Cushing, well, you know, Cushing's an automatic win if you cast him, isn't he? Because even though he's doing these horrific things to Koenig, he comes across as benevolent because Peter Cushing, so softly spoken, so genteel. Oh, just wonderful. So Peter Cushing, again, in a huge bonnet with gold makeup on, you know, it's just a win, isn't it?
In the original, in the script, probably maybe not in the draft script, I don't remember now the way it goes, but Ron is described as being over 500 years old, and he gives his daughter's age as like 217 or something like that, even though she looks very young. And then she does say that, you know, we live a much longer lifespan, and she hints at Koenig that could maybe be made, they could alter him to live as long. But the idea was that he's really old, but he looks very young. So Ron's supposed to look like he's in his 20s, but he's really over 500 years old.
Yeah, I think had the cast a younger actor without that level of gravitas, I don't think it would have worked.
I believe
Peter Cushing, you can absolutely believe, could be a 500-year-old anthropologist. Just
right, and still looks
his manner. Yeah,
fits 50. You know.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's a funny thing, isn't it? Because, of course, he's only a few years out from... He's probably filming this only 2 years before he's Governor Tarkin in Star Wars, you know? So if he's filming this in 74, Star Wars is getting filmed in 76, I think. And, you know, he's a busy guy, but he looks pretty good. But he was a busy guy that year. So that year he did Frankenstein and the Monster from Hell, Madhouse, From Beyond the Grave, an Amicus horror portmanteau, The Beast Must Die, which we've mentioned on this podcast before, the amazing werewolf mystery whodunit. He did the 2 Shaw Brothers movies as well, Legend of the Seven Golden Vampires and Shatter. So, you know what? He wasn't slowing down. He was still a busy guy. And I think at this stage, was he doing the BBC Sherlock Holmes series, or had he packed that in by then? I can't remember. Yeah, because at one point he was playing Sherlock Holmes for the Beeb as well. There's a funny bit in the series though, because he's having this flirtation with this hot alien babe, and there's a scene where Helena and Matthias are struggling with what to do with this patient in the vegetative state and rapidly coming to a fatal conclusion, even over the objections of Sandra and Alan Carter, which we'll get to in a moment. But he's got this wonderful sort of smug half smile on his face when it cuts to him in the bed in the medical suite where they're talking about turning him off, because in his head at the time, he's smooching this, he's smooching this alien girl. And I think Martin Landau must have been thinking about that other script where he's laid there unconscious, because he's got this look on his face where he's just like, oh, I'm in a good place. It's absolutely amazing.
I didn't notice that.
Amazing. And we get some more philosophy, but in the TV show, we get an Alan Carter fight. And I didn't remember this at all. Alan Carter objects so strongly to them wanting to turn Koenig's life support off that he has a huge fight with Matthias, the other doctor. And you can tell Ray Austin's a stuntman because it's a really brutal fight, and there's one shot at the last bit where Matthias gets slung into a desk and his head smacks off the desk. It's absolutely terrific. Like a 10-second long fight. Now, I'm watching this and entirely remembering why Alan, in the playground when I was at school, when we were watching Space 1999, Alan was everyone's favourite. Not Koenig. Alan was everyone's favourite because what a bloke. He absolutely fucks Matthias up really badly before security intervene, and then quite cruelly stand there with him restrained and make him watch them turning Koenig off. It's absolutely crazy. It's crazy. But that's not in the book either. I was watching the scene
yesterday. The stunt work is very well. When I don't remember which character hits the table with the side of his neck, I thought to myself, that looked like an accident.
That's Matthias. It's like, Alan is the doctor. Stop what you're doing, man. Stop.
The running joke in fandom in terms of the series is that Matthias is always getting his ass kicked. It's like in Buffy the Vampire Slayer where Giles is constantly getting knocked out episode after episode. Matthias is always getting his ass kicked in the series.
Of course, it's Matthias, isn't it? I keep saying Matthias. Yeah, it's Matthias. But it's not in the book. It's sort of a condensation of a large passage in the book that involves an almost mutiny by some members of Moonbase Alpha when they hear that the medical team are going to get switched off. And I think Ball, once again, shows just how skillful he is, because up to now, this takes place in like 40 pages, and we've got this wonderful series of pages where, and again, it's quite weird to read when you're a Space 1999 fan, of mutiny simmering under the surface because they're gonna switch off Koenig's life support, and somebody's caught with a laser blaster in main control, and Kano and Paul almost get into a fight again. It's wild stuff. I mean, it all resolves, of course, because Koenig chooses Alpha over the Zenites and they let him return. So when they switch him off, they all stand there just about to sob and looking emotional, and then he wakes up and everybody's happy and relieved. It's like, oh, phew, thank goodness for that. Yeah,
I don't know that we handled it. I don't know that I handled it well, but there was this subtext in the original novelization that Koenig is manipulating Vanna to, in a sense, make her father feel uncomfortable and then want to wish that he goes back instead of keeping him there. And we left that in. But there's some discussion about what is Koenig's thought. I mean, like, at first he wants to go back. He doesn't want to be there. He doesn't want to be their experimental animal. He wants to go back. But then he does begin to feel things for Vanna. And more than that, he begins to see a world of possibility and is learning how to manipulate matter with his mind under her tutelage. But I put in the omnibus that he begins to think this, and it's oddly enough in Guardian of Piri, the dialogue comes out that you've borne this burden. It was almost too much, all on your shoulders, the good servant says to him. And so I tied it into that, in that Koenig is, yes, I need to go back. I have the responsibility, but for a moment he's thinking, what would life be like without that crushing responsibility of all these lives on my shoulders? I think he toys with the idea. I'm not saying that he was going to give into it, but he indicates that he's going to want to stay there, because then it makes Ron want to make him leave, because he's not just going to stay there. He's going to be with Ron's daughter, and he's not happy about that. And so that eventually he gets his initial wish of being able to leave, but he leaves still with a certain amount of regret of what he's lost. He's lost a woman who loves him. The relationship with Helen is not fully established by this time, and a planet of paradise where, you can just think what you want, and create it out of pure thought. And it has to be an attractive thought to any person.
Yeah, and the novelization does a better job of selling it, doesn't it? Because in the TV show, you don't really get that sense that this is a lived-in planet. Because in the novelization, he witnesses the Zenites, he witnesses the city and its changing nature. It's quite more Cockean, actually. It's almost like there's a parallel between them and the people at the end of time in the Dance at the End of Time trilogy, in that they have this ultimate power to change the world and mold it how they see fit according to their whims, basically. They're ultimately powerful. The differences in the Moorcock stuff. They all call themselves like Lord Shark and Mungrove and have colossal depressions and do ridiculous things and create mad circuses. And so it's all a little bit more psychedelic, but it's a similar kind of thing. You don't really pick up on that in the TV version because of the limitations of television. So whenever you see Zeno, it's an admittedly quite attractive matte painting with some really nice effects to make some of it look animate with lights, but you don't get the degree of detail that he sees, and you don't necessarily get that sense that he's being offered almost like an elevated level of power, and to advance and evolve as a human being. So I think in the TV show, the love story element with Rana doesn't really stack up in the way that it does in the novelization. But then again, the TV show's got the stuff that isn't in the novelization. And if you could combine the two, well, that brings us on really to, what you did with this for Omnibus year one.
My approach to Missing Link was to start from the novelization and then to compare it to the transcript, and the transcript would have to win. The idea was to hew the episode as written to the episode as shown, but to preserve absolutely as much of the prose as I possibly could, changing some of the dialogue, adding the dialogue from the novelization, making the discussions, broader and more lengthy. And then, of course, writing in the scenes that were in the episode that weren't in the novelization, but adding in the scenes from the novelization that weren't in the episode. And so that my view of the relationship between Koenig and Vanna is not limited to only what I saw on screen, but I see the story as this sort of like mixture of the novelization and the episode. Kate Orman, who's a Doctor Who writer, once said that the way she looks at Doctor Who, especially like during, the Tom Baker years, is that you're seeing a representation in reduced quality of actual events in an alternate universe. So that all of these things happened, but, the sets didn't wobble. And, and so that you're seeing a representation of these things, but you take it seriously, but you don't fault it for any sort of like errors that you see on screen or, sometimes bad acting choices that actors might have made or plot holes and things like that, but these are represented. So I think of it the same way, that this adventure with Koenig going to Zeno and the whole thing of Missing Link is a story that exists in a sense separate from just what you see on screen and just what you read in the novelization, that you think this is a real thing and these are just two representations of it.
I really like to think of these things in that way, because it's like stories handed down, isn't it? That they mutate, they change, there are different representations of these things. And I think there's a specific expression for it. I can't remember what it is right now. My brain is failing me. But these stories take on additional context and additional meaning over time. And people read things differently. So actually taking that approach to storytelling, but also translation of stories and existing material, I think is absolutely valid. I
think it also highlights one of the problems with the series not being serialized, in that the relationship between Koenig and Dr. Russell is, depending on the order in which you watch the episodes, is hot and cold. Yeah. They're a couple, they're not a couple. They're barely getting to know each other. Then they're clearly have a romantic relationship. Then they don't. So that was one of the things that was clear in this episode. I mean, like in the episode, she's clearly upset about seeing him die or, pulling the plug on him. But you don't get the sense that he's not thinking, I need to get back to, my relationship to the woman I love and He doesn't say to Vanna at any point, I'm already in a relationship, he doesn't say these things, but her portrayal indicates that she has feelings. Now, it's very possible that one of the two fell in love with the other, not at the same time,
Yeah.
And so that could certainly be playing into it, but it's one of those strange things that as the series went on, they were much, much clearly in love with each other. And then by the time you got to year 2, they were, full on couple. But in the books, we tried to do the same thing, build that relationship. In the omnibus, we tried to build a relationship so that it grew throughout the series in a sort of like progressive way that made sense. So it wasn't just making this episode make sense between the novelization and the filmed episode, but also where it fit in to this larger canon of stories.
There's one exchange between, is it Van? I'm getting my Vans and my Ranas mixed up.
It's Ran and Vanna.
Yeah, Ran. There's one exchange between Ran and Koenig in the novelisation where he asks Koenig if there is a relationship between him and Helena, and Koenig just says, well, can't you just read my mind? Or something, words to that effect. And that's quite interesting as well, because obviously there's something there, but he's not able to express it at that point. So, yeah. But, what an episode. It's got all the philosophical musings we love about Space 1999. It's got the horror. It's got the moral conundrums. It's got Alan fucking someone up. Plus amazing direction. Great performances, particularly Martin Landau's performance in that nightmare scene, which is absolutely incredible when he wakes up in that chair covered in what looks like cobweb. But we should rate it. Right. And I've been watching old episodes of Tim Heidecker's On Cinema at the Cinema for hours on end while I've been working this week. And they go with a popcorn bucket rating. But we need something more Space 1999 appropriate. So I'm going to rate it 4 Comlocks out of 5 and 1 pink purple planet. What about you?
Well, I was thinking about this because you can rate the episodes based on the plot. Mm-hmm. Interesting plots, lots of action, things like this. And you can rate things on atmosphere. And atmospherically, this is it's probably the number 1 episode.
It is terrific.
Just steeped in atmosphere. And as we mentioned in exchange on WhatsApp, I mean, it's Peter fucking Cushing.
That's right. Yeah.
His performance elevates anything he's in. And he's on a par with Martin Landau. It's not like he's acting with some minor, bit player. They are both giving it really good performances and playing off each other. In terms of atmosphere, it's 5 out of 5. Mm-hmm. In terms of plot, at some point you can say not a lot happens. He goes there are some experiments, they talk, and then he, through a manipulation, he gets to go back. And, but I it's one of my favorites. So I'm going to say it's up there. It's definitely one of my top episodes.
So you're going 5 Comlocks.
I got 5 Comlocks. Yeah.
Okay.
And not risk communicators.
Oh yeah. Not risk yes.
Originally they were like these things that were on their wrist, and then that was jettisoned to have Comlocks, but the original draft script still had the wrist communication, and it shows up in the original book.
Do you know what? As a kid, I so wanted a comlock. I wanted every door that I went through, I wanted to point my comlock at it and beep it open. I was so gutted. I thought by now we'd have them, It was 1978 or whatever when I was watching it, and 2026, we still don't have comlocks and doors that we can beep open. My God, technology has failed us. So next up is the novelisation of Force of Life, but there's a really nice little bridging passage that links the 2 episodes. I'll just read a bit of because I really love this. It's great. The rock that was the refuge prison and spaceship for the Alphans hung poised across the great gulf between the island universes. Koenig watched from his sickbed. No one could remain unmoved by the sheer immensity of the gulf. No stars, sable blackness, the end of the galaxy. Koenig knew what every last man and woman at Moonbase Alpha was thinking. There were no star maps now. Paul Morrow called to him. Watching, John? We're leaving the galaxy. Koenig said. There's a lot of open space out there, but we'll make it. Morrow caught the tension in his voice. How's the head? I don't feel a thing. He did. The migraine had been identified by Eleanor Russell. She was using a mixture of drugs and hypnosis to rid him of it. without success. Dr. Russell wants to look in. Tell Helena I'm fine. I'll read a book for a while and maybe come up to main mission later. Paul Morrow nodded and broke the contact. How is he? Asked David Kano. You heard. The same old John, but hollow inside. Morrow watched the vast emptiness for a while. She must have been some woman. He told you about her? Only that he and she talked. John isn't one to discuss his relationships, but she's left a gap in his life. Everyone knows it. He's recovering, said Kano. I talked to Helena. The fracture's healed well, with no permanent damage. She could remove the scar if he'd let her. The headaches have no physical cause. When he forgets the Zenite woman, they'll go. I wish he'd come out. Give him time. Morrow looked out again. We've had no trouble for weeks. It's just as well. Morale's been good, but the crew wants to see him up and around. Koenig lay back on his bunk and reached for the battered book of poetry. The book fell open at a couplet he had chanced on. All days are nights to see till I see thee, and nights bright days when dreams do show me thee. Koenig read the lines and felt the knife-thin edge of agony burned into his brain. No. I mean, as I say, I wasn't entirely sold on the love story, but it's a nice touch. Did you return these bridging passages for the Powysverse versions?
Some of them. Certainly the idea of leaving the galaxy we had to get rid of.
Yeah.
Because it would have invalidated the whole rest of the series.
Yeah.
I don't know what he was thinking. So we changed it to, and not even in this story, but to the next story where the moon enters into this dust cloud.
Yeah.
And so that they can't see any stars. It's just blackness outside. And even though the dust doesn't pose any danger to them, people are depressed because they just feel like they're in a black void because they can't see anything. So that we did preserve. The idea of oddly enough, I think I mentioned in my notes that Michael Butterworth included the idea of the moon leaving the galaxy in his final year 2 novel, The End of the Infinite. And that they were like to the last few star systems before they were going to leave the galaxy and basically have no hope. And he has them settle on a planet in the very, very last system by switching the last 2 episodes in order and ending the series because the series had been canceled. His books were still contracted. So he wrote them and he thought, I'm just going to give it an ending. This is never going to go anywhere from here.
Yeah.
He took that idea and expressed it. So even if we had wanted to, it was no way you could do it twice. Although I changed even his, because we were going to do books after that it was the moon was moving between 2 of the spiral arms so that it would be an extended period where there would be nothing, but not forever and ever because, the travel from one galaxy to another is, that's just a death sentence.
People who dismiss Space 1999, one of the most common criticisms is, well, it's silly, the idea of the moon moving around the galaxy like a spaceship. But you know what? It works on a storytelling level because it's like the magic faraway tree, almost. It's a conceit to get you from one moral conundrum and fantastic story to the next. Right. And it just takes a little bit of suspension of disbelief, and that's all it takes, and it works for me. It works for me fine. But I can absolutely understand the need to at least make it give it some kind of internal consistency.
Right. We definitely did include his longing for the life that he could have had and with Vana throughout throughout the next 2 episodes, Force of Life and Guardian of Piri. He included them in the original novelization. We built them back into the omnibus because I liked that idea of that continuity. The one thing we had to do though is because it was a little, maybe I don't want to say overdone, but for a lot of Force of Life, Koenig is just in a depression and he doesn't want to come out of his quarters. And he doesn't, okay, fine. Give me the report, but he doesn't care. And that didn't work for us in terms of making Force of Life. And eventually that was what guided William Latham when he took on that episode to do. We were coming up on getting the book done. So we had a bunch of episodes we still had to do, Earthbound and these 3. So I said, look, I'll take these 2. I'll take Missing Link and Guardian of Piri. And Patricia said, I'll take Earthbound. And there was a novelization for Earthbound in the 2000s for Fanderson, but it didn't work for our purposes. So she wrote a completely new one. And William Latham said, you know what? I had said to me, look, my thing is to try and meld the script with the original novelization. And Patricia said to him, you know what? That's not probably going to work here because Koenig is just in a funk And he's not a real participant in this episode, and he needs to be. And so William Latham said, I'm just going to start from the transcript. I'm going to write a new novelization, and I'm not going to consult the original book.
Right. Okay.
And that's what he did. But I did build some of the passages. I made some of the passages. I didn't edit a lot of his work, but in this story, but I did add some of those things back in. The references to Vanna and things like that. I added some of those back in just because they were going to be in the third story, and you can't just have him, I don't care, and then suddenly, I'm all depressed about it again,
Yeah. Well, I actually did find it quite amusing because whilst Koenig is moping in bed, all pilled up, because he's popping pills, he's been there for weeks, popping pills and moping. He should be physically recovered, but he's just like, give me some more pills. Meanwhile, poor Anton Zoref, the technician, is getting out of bed because his alarm's going off, and a weird blob of energy emerges from the Gulf of Space, heads for Alpha, and because Koenig's all pilled up and in bed and out for the count, main mission have this critical decision to make on whether to shoot it up with their nukes. But it vanishes before they can open fire. And in a scene reminiscent of like some kind of Lovecraftian horror, it grabs this crew member, Zoref. Meanwhile, they're trying to drag Koenig out of his drug-induced moping stupor. It's it's quite funny, really. But there's this one little bit which I did enjoy when I read it. I do enjoy. Sometimes I enjoy the trash of things, and I entirely understand why you might have changed it. Whereas it says, Koenig wanted oblivion. They wouldn't leave him alone. Look, John, Bergman was saying, here's the extreme-ranging scan. Just a blotch, irregular, a shifting pattern of energies, almost as if it's in a state of change. Growth, if you like. He's saying it's alive, said David Kano. Yes, agreed Koenig. They had observed aberrations in space before, weird energy sources, the debris of stars blown out 10 million years before, so why get worked up over another? John, there's the other thing too, said Kano, the technician who panicked. Morrow felt uncomfortable as he pointed out the facts to the commander. It wasn't like John to be so slow. Look, Commander, you can see there's another coincidental reading, he said. I was going to blast the energy source just as Technician Zoref pressed the panic button. 3 things, John, said Bergman. 1, we lose contact with the energy source. 2, Zoref sees or hears something that scares him so bad he panics. 3, we lose a chunk of energy from his station in number 2 NGA. It should be investigated, suggested Morrow. So investigate, said Koenig, with an effort. He tried not to notice the disappointment of the 3 men. It's like, oh, Koenig, you really have got your head up your arse, mate. Sort yourself out. I think it's quite funny. But we know Zoref isn't right. We know that, of course, but his wife and colleagues are soon going to find out he's a bit off. First, he's being shitty with his wife because he wants the heating whacked all the way up to max. Who hasn't had an argument at home with the missus about the heating? But he's a little bit more over the top and toxic about it. And then his co-technician in the nuclear generator room finds out firsthand that Zoref's need for heat goes way beyond turning the radiators up, because Zoref complains of being freezing cold. His colleague gives him a cup of coffee, it freezes solid in his hand, and his poor colleague puts a hand on his shoulder and is frozen to death and collapses like a frozen popsicle. So we're in Quatermass territory now, aren't we? Zoref begins to lose humanity, physically mutate in the novel in a way that he doesn't in the TV shows. The Force overcomes him, whilst his wife is desperate to save him from the inevitable. So it's very Quatermass experiment. And there's a pretty high body count too, isn't there? Because there's a medical technician, gets it, and Phil, my wife, who's a nurse. When the poor medical technician gets stalked down the corridor by Lovejoy, we'll get to Lovejoy in a minute, she was like, Helena and Matthias don't seem particularly bothered that one of their medical technicians just died. They're really cold and dispassionate about it. They must have worked with her for years. These poor nurses don't get any breaks on Space 1999. They're just treated like drones by Helena and Matthias, which I think is probably true. But following a showdown in the solarium, which is very nice, and the medical centre, Zoref heads for the nuclear generator room, and Alpha Reason loses a crew member when Koenig orders the power switched off across the base, and some poor bugger's life support goes out and they die. In the TV show, Matthias and a colleague are seen giving them CPR, but in the book it's quite plain. Helena begs him not to restore the power because the patient will die. John says no, and the patient dies, which is quite hard and brutal. But there's loads and loads of stuff in here in the novelisation and the TV version that extend our view of the moon base and the Alphans beyond the activity in main mission. Like, I think it was Xenia Merton in one of the interviews referenced in the unofficial companion said that they all laughed when they watched this because they thought, oh, we do have bedrooms then.
Yeah.
You know, the idea that the Alphans actually have a life when they're not on shift and they have beds to go to and partners and spouses and places to go and places to stay. And yeah, the solarium, I think, you know, just, it's a bit UFO, the solarium, you know, the hot alpha chicks in bikinis on sunbeds. But those little details are absolutely brilliant. But we're going to talk about the broadcast episode a little bit because once again, we've got some key differences. First major difference, obviously, is an episodic TV thing, so there's zero reference to the events previously, and Koenig is on top of his game, unlike the novelisation, where he's just popping pills and staying in bed. Right. But Zoref...
But it gives an opportunity for Brian Ball to give a more forward role to Kano and to Bergman, who, in a sense, act in the scenes where Koenig would have been the protagonist, you know. So I think
the TV needed more. The TV show needed more of that. But
well, definitely.
I suppose, like any TV show that has stars, and the big powerful stars happened in Star Trek, didn't it? It's like, you know, how about you take a back seat and are unconscious or in bed for the most of this episode, and everybody else gets some TV time? It's like, no, I don't think so. I'm the star of this show. Yeah, talking about stars of shows, Zoref is played by someone who, in the UK of a certain age, would just be called Lovejoy. Ian McShane. How would Ian McShane's image in the US be defined these days?
Today, as the proprietor of the Continental Hotel.
Yeah, that's right. A few years ago, it would have been Al Swearingen from Deadwood.
That was probably the role that made him famous here.
Yeah, and then all of a sudden he is everywhere and in everything, wasn't he? But in Britain, until Deadwood, which was over 30 years later, Ian McShane was a regular on telly. And he was in a series which probably ran for 7 or 8 seasons called Lovejoy, where he was an antique dealer who got involved in, sometimes it was crimes, sometimes it was one of those classic British TV shows where, I once started to design a role-playing game based upon all these TV shows, American ones as well, like Banachek and Petrocelli and Quincy and all these things. And I had a random table of what profession this TV character would have. And it just so happens that Lovejoy was antiquarian stroke antiques dealer, and he was surrounded by some colourful characters, and that series ran for years and years and years. But at the time, he was appearing in a few films and a lot of telly, but it just had, a couple of years before that, second billing to Richard Burton in a really bleak British crime drama called Villain, which was, I think it was well reviewed, but it didn't do that well. It didn't do much in the USA, that's for sure, but it didn't launch him into the stratosphere. This is pre-Lovejoy, of course, but he was a really recognisable British character actor. And just about every episode tends to have them, doesn't it? So I think Ian McShane was a real catch to actually play this role. And I think he does an absolutely fantastic job of playing a guy who starts from having this workplace accident. Then the workplace accident causes some really, really negative consequences, not only for him, for his wife, for the people around him, and he eventually becomes a literal monster. And he plays it absolutely fantastically. And it's interesting that in the book, he becomes mutated and horrific. But in the TV show, it's entirely sold by his acting. And again, some absolutely terrific direction. It's absolutely brilliant. And
you can see in his performance when it's Zoref and when it's Zoref's body being controlled by this entity, you know, and how he looks at the woman, and then he's trying to, you can see the internal struggle as he's trying to stop this thing, especially when his wife, Eva, shows up. She wants to be with him. She wants to go near him. He's trying to keep her away, but the energy creature's sensing heat. And it's interesting. His performance sells it, the internal struggle, without us ever witnessing the internal struggle. Yeah. Like you do in the book, where, especially with Latham's version, you have Zoref's thoughts being trapped in his body and knowing that he can't affect what his body does, and feeling the guilt of killing his best friend Mark Dominic's and the threat that he poses to his wife. I mean, he really does a great job of putting Zoref's thoughts onto the page.
Yeah, it's absolutely terrific. And I think there are a few stars of this. One obviously is Ian McShane. I think the direction, again, is brilliant. The fact that they actually created these shows on film allows them to use anamorphic lenses and all sorts of other tricks to create, visual tricks to make you feel uneasy. The music's fantastic. It's got all the stamps of a slasher movie. I mean, slasher movies weren't really even particularly a thing then. But in the novel, there's a lovely description as well of, it's a blue ball of light in the series, but in the novel it's described as a grey-black blotch that writhes like a malignant tumour, which is a wonderful, Lovecraftian monster description of something hideous. It could be like the colour out of space or something like that. Mm. So you've got all of the great direction. You've got the classic stalker and slasher scenes with crew members in peril. Interesting note on the casting. So Zoref's Kotek, or what was it called?
Mark Dominic.
Yeah, Donix. He looks really, really familiar to me. And I couldn't put my finger on who he was. And this is one of the things about watching a lot of telly from the time, particularly British telly, all these British character actors. And it turns out that he's a guy called John Hamill, and is in the Beast in the Cellar, a film I probably rewatch at least once every couple of years, and is in the incredibly bleak and out of order film No Blade of Grass, which was an adaptation of John Christopher's The Death of Grass. And just before, the year before this, he was in a film called The National Health, one of Britain's best ever black comedies from the 1970s. And he did absolutely shitloads of telly, including Doctor Who and The Professionals. He was a bodybuilder before he was an actor, because he's a big buff guy. He was just one of those super recognisable faces. But yeah, all of those beautiful tricks. And by the end, when Zoref is confronted in the nuclear generator room, in the novel, he is the crazy Quatermass-style monster. In the show, on the other hand, is just Lovejoy. Lovejoy acting the shit out of the scenes. But after he's shot, bloody hell, I mentioned watching Space 1999 on a Saturday morning. No way this could have been broadcast again on a Saturday morning for the second time running, because after they shoot him and he absorbs the energy and it gives him the power to get into the generator room, it basically looks like a burnt corpse from a house fire. It's absolutely horrific. It's really terrible.
I agree. One of the most horrific things about it, I mean, of course, the clothing burned and in rags around him, of course, the glowing eyes and everything. But there's this tuft of hair on the back of his skull that just, I don't know who came up with that, but it's horrific, because he's been burned. All the hair's been burned off his body, but because in the back of his head, it's still there, and it just looks terrible. In the novelization, when Koenig fires in the novelization, it's Koenig that fires the laser at him. In the episode, it's Carter, and because he's coming toward them, and so he just instinctively shoots him. But in the novelization, I noticed it for the first time yesterday when I was rereading it, this week when I was rereading everything. Zoref opens his mouth to feed on the light. I thought that was really, really well done.
Yeah, it's terrific. And the actual descriptions of him when he's in that advanced state, what does it says? The great grey black mass of his head pivoted in a tiny and residual part of his psyche. He knew her, his wife. She had seen the head now, the metallic coated body, the tree-like limbs gleaming dully in the half-light of fission. And still she went to him. So I'm really glad that they didn't make him look like some kind of weird space monster, and they went for this approach instead of stressed out Ian McShane turning into burnt house fire corpse.
Which was a shock. I mean, it wasn't a gradual thing. It was a shock. They would have lost that moment. The episode was directed by David Tomlin, who was very close friends with Johnny Byrne, and he was very pleased with it. A couple of things with the direction. Did you notice the solarium scene? How it was set up? It was a reproduction of The Graduate.
Oh, no, I didn't notice that.
Yeah, so the woman is laying there and her leg is bent like this, and under her knee you can see him at the doorway. And that's the same thing as happens with, was it Anne Bancroft and Dustin?
Right, okay, yeah. Yeah, you get the keyhole shot through the kinked leg.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It was clearly an homage to that because it was set up exactly the same.
Yeah. My frames of references generally tend to be more like 70s and 80s horror movies and sci-fi stuff and stuff like that, so I probably never would have made that connection. Just terrific stuff.
So now, I have to ask you, what Doctor Who episode was Zoref's workmate?
Oh, Hamill. He was in, I think it was the Ribos operation.
Oh, okay.
It was either the Ribos operation or the Androids of Tara. I think it was the Ribos operation in the Key to Time series, the Tom Baker series.
Interesting.
With the first version of Romana. Yeah.
There, one thing about...
Because he retired from acting in the 80s, apparently.
Oh, I didn't know that. I mean, I didn't know much about him at all, to be honest.
Yeah.
I didn't know his name or what he had done. And so much of British television, we only get a small sample of it. So people that are celebrities over there, we don't know who they are, you know.
My wife will tell you that I can't remember what she told me 2 days ago, but I will remember a face of an actor from an episode of The Bill in 1983. One of those strange things about my brain is wired. I have got a stupid memory for trivia about garbage films and trash TV, and I can't remember a thing about stuff I worked on 2 days ago. Yeah, it's one of those things. So what else did you do with the rewrite for this one?
Not much, because Latham did not consult the original book. He just wrote a new novelization based on the transcript and episode. And if there are any passages where Koenig is feeling, you know, the loss of Zeno and Violet, he added those in. I may have added a couple of them in, but I think I only changed a handful of lines in his work. And I asked him, can I do this? Can I do that? Because it doesn't make sense. And, or it doesn't tie up. But I think all of this is Latham's work, not really my work at all.
There's a couple of really nice lines that you highlight.
That's the thing.
Yeah. They're lovely. Yeah. You talk about them.
He added some descriptive lines that I just thought just were really beautifully written. When at the very beginning of the story, when this creature thing sees the moon and senses that there's light and energy there, he writes, "The hunger tasted light and moved toward it." Mm-hmm. I thought that was beautifully written. When Zorov walks into the reactor, he wrote, "His body sang in white light." Mm-hmm. I thought was also a wonderful line. And at the end, Koenig says, "Tragic that this particular phoenix had to rise from our ashes." I thought, I wish I could say that's why we pay him the big bucks, because we don't pay him. But he's an excellent writer. And, those lines. I also wanted to go back, is that I was so proud, we didn't mention it, in Missing Link, that Ron has told Koenig, I'm as human as you are, but from the future. He says, you won't even suspect that this planet exists for another 5 million years. So clearly they're in different time periods, you know?
Yeah.
So he hasn't just moved Koenig in space, but in time as well. And at the end, he talks about Koenig, we have the ancient texts, which means texts from Earth. And he said they're very descriptive, but they don't give us the full picture. And at the end, I inserted that line from The Tempest, on which the episode was, somewhat based. Yeah. And I love the fact that he quotes Prospero as the magician, the sorcerer, and Koenig recognizes the line and smiles at Ron, saying that, I get that. I love that little bit of communication between the two of them, that I know what my role has been. I know and you know what your role has been. And, we're living out this story. And, that was one of the things that I felt really proud of. I searched that whole play to be able to insert a line, and then to find the line right at the end of the play, where Prospero says, that's it. I've done, I'm not going to do any more here. Go. I don't want to quote the whole line, but it just, it made it special.
The sole drift of my purpose doth extend not a frown further.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. Wonderful. Wonderful. So how do you rate Force of Life?
Oh, it's a perfect episode. It's even more perfect than Missing Link. There's no sort of debate here about what are the motivations of this character, that character. Yeah. If I would have to then demote Missing Link, which I think is just wonderful in terms of atmosphere, but Force of Life is probably one of, it'd be at a 6 out of 5. It's just, So, and the music was not written by Barry Gray. It was sourced from a music library, and it's so appropriate. There's a little bit of Barry Gray music in the episode, but it's just a masterful work.
I agree. I think it's a perfect Space 1999 episode. I don't think it's got any weaknesses whatsoever. The direction is terrific. The story is simple but impactful. The performances are great. So for me, it's 5 complocks and 2 alpha bikinis. Easy. Yeah.
The actress who played the actor who played his wife did a good job.
She did. She was excellent.
Excellent.
Yeah. So finally, we finish off the book with Guardian of Piri. So once again, we get a nice bridging sequence that includes some callbacks to Koenig's experience in Missing Link and how Alpha addresses the fallout from Force of Life too, with them rebuilding the generator room. It references the moon and being in this dark gulf in space and how it affects everybody's mood. It's particularly the stuff about the morale and the behaviour of the Alphans and the deterioration in discipline. And I've got to read another bit because this made me laugh. It's of its time. During the day cycles that followed, the Alphans caught up on their lost sleep. A week drifted by and soon the routine maintenance of Moonbase was in hand again. A system of random checks had been instituted to guard against an over-reliance on instrumentation. The checks turned up very little, but the exercise was a useful one. It kept the technical crews busy, and it created an additional confidence amongst the rest of the Alphans. Gradually, however, the sense of isolation began to oppress them. The deep sable of the Gulf had a bleakly depressing effect on men and women who were used to the diamond tracery of stars. There were no clouds of star debris, no stray asteroids on their lonely journeys around massive star systems, no flarings of supernovas into the awesome majesty. There was nothing to see but the funereal reaches of dead black space. Koenig noticed the edginess amongst the lower grades of service personnel. The girl who brought the coffee had lost her cheerfulness. The women who collected the laundry looked positively sullen, and Dr. Russell reported 3 cases of drug stealing. It was the sleep-inducing pills that went. She suspected one of the orderlies and had her transferred to other duties. It's like the description of how things are breaking down on Alpha are the coffee girl, the laundry women, and the female medically orderlies stealing drugs. It's absolutely incredible. Send women into space, and this is what happens. According to Brian Ball. Absolutely amazing. Absolutely amazing. And then Koenig gives this amazing inspirational speech to address some of the fed-up technicians after he gets wound up by the fat one, which is absolutely incredible. Oh, where are we? Koenig touched the side of his head. The skin was unblemished, yet there was still a tingling of remembrance. Both Bergman and Helena were right. No one had time for traumas when Moonbase was under siege. Isolation and inaction were the subtler enemies. Koenig called the section chiefs to discuss ways of counteracting the loss of morale. Tighten maintenance procedures, Koenig ordered. Get a new program of checks for the Eagles and run pilot courses for anyone interested, he told Paul Morrow. I want everyone busy. I could offer medical training for a limited number, said Helena Russell. Advanced computer analysis, Kano said. Koenig nodded. Anyone else? Simulated astro readings, Bergman offered. Useful if we ever see the stars again. Koenig smiled. There was no edge of bitterness in Bergman's voice. He hadn't cracked. Flower arrangement, someone muttered. Koenig looked up sharply. A fattish service engineer of considerable seniority was looking intently at the floor. If it keeps someone off drugs, then yes, flower arrangement, Koenig called. First found your flowers, someone else muttered, and this time there was a hint of despair. Koenig ignored it. We're between islands and deep space, he said. We're out beyond the range of Earth's furthest ranging scanners, but that shouldn't worry us. Keep it firmly before your sections. There's no way back for us. We go where the moon's flight path takes us and we live with it. Make sure that every last man and woman on Moonbase Alpha understands. Until we're across the Gulf, there can be no more talk of a future anywhere except here, on this planet, on this base, right here. There's nothing, but nothing out there. Only 10 hours later, Koenig wondered at the irony of it all. It's like, absolutely brilliant. Oh, amazing. But it does lead into the kick-off of this story proper. The discovery of an extremely promising planet orbiting a single star in the midst of the Gulf that lifts everyone's mood as it looks for a candidate for settlement, at which point Alpha can instigate Operation Exodus. Now, Mateo, it's been a while since I watched the full series. Is this the first mention of Operation Exodus, or have we been there before?
I'd have to think about this. No, it wasn't I don't think it was the first mention in the television series, because there were definitely episodes where they were thinking about settling on a planet, but I don't know if it was the first time they mentioned it as Operation Exodus. In the omnibus, we probably mentioned it in story number 2.
And of course, for listeners who have no idea what the hell we're talking about, what is Operation Exodus?
Well, Operation Exodus is the procedures and plans to evacuate Moonbase Alpha completely. And so it's taking whatever machines and stores and whatever they can, loading them on Eagles, and then abandoning the base.
Now, of the three, quite apart from anything else, this is only the midpoint in the series, so we can be pretty confident it'll go pear-shaped in some way. But of the three, this is the one that isn't a horror story, but it is a very 1970s lensed critical look at how opting out and giving into a bit of hedonism and pure escapism and leisure to deal with the horrors of being stranded in space whilst all the cosmic horror goes on around you and your loved ones die and your friends die isn't the right way to go. So we have to talk about the broadcast version and Ball's novelisation from the off here, because there are quite a lot of differences, aren't they? And I know from your notes you said that you effectively didn't use the majority of Ball's novelisation here. You went from the episode transcript itself.
I started from the transcripts. We had to, of course, completely rewrite all of the description of the planet itself, because the planet was described as this blackened, burnt ruins and rubble and gravel, but that they were under the illusion that it was a land of milk and honey with fruit trees and grass and rivers, but that it wasn't real. And in the episode as aired, it was neither of those things. It was this very strange landscape of these trees that have these spheres in them, white spheres. Well, you can call them trees. It's funny. The set, Keith Wilson, who designed all of this, got criticized for it as being too bizarre. And I love it. I read an interview where he said, like, maybe I went too far, maybe they were right. But I thought, no, this is what sold this series. When I saw that image of that planet, I thought to myself, this is special. This is something very, very, very alien. I wasn't bothered by it at all. I thought it was, I think all the fans think it's very intriguing set design. But
this is one of the reasons why I adore Space 1999, because to me, space should be psychedelic and weird, right? I don't want another polystyrene cave set or polystyrene boulders on perfectly flat floors like you were even getting in Star Trek Into the 90s, and until they started being able to use stuff like the volume, like I think they're doing with Strange New Worlds and things like that these days. But even in the next generation, 20, 30 years, and Deep Space Nine, 15 years later, 20 years later, even in things like Voyager, the alien planets just looked exactly the same as they did in the 60s original series,
just go out to the countryside and
either film it just out back of LA in one of those areas, or film it in a studio with some polystyrene boulders and perfectly flat floors painted to look like stone. Yeah, terrible. This stuff, crazy psychedelic globe trees and geometric patterns, and the actual image of the Guardian, because of course, let's just explain essentially what the plot is here. In the novelisation, Koenig briefs a couple of pilots from Morrow's reconnaissance team. Interestingly, he's a little bit sceptical about the co-pilot, a guy called Irving, who's high-spirited and very smiley kind of guy. We don't see this in the broadcast version, though. We just go straight to them being reckless and high-spirited to the point of being in danger. Irving, played by Michael Culver, another familiar face from British TV, probably immortalised as Captain Needa from The Empire Strikes Back, who Darth Vader remotely strangles and says, "Apology accepted, Captain Needa." Another one of these character actors from a British TV show who's immortalised in Star Wars memory. But there are these differences, largely character moments. But what essentially happens is Eagle goes down, pilots behave weirdly, they think they've crashed, so they go and check it out. I think it's in the TV show, it's Alan and Koenig who go down to check it out, and they see that it's stuck there and actually something weird is going on with this planet. It's having a hypnotic effect on people. It starts to have a hypnotic effect on the people in main mission, and everybody starts to think, yes, this is groovy. There's this subplot with the computer also being affected by this planet and giving everybody this idea that everything's brilliant and peachy, and actually they should institute Operation Exodus. And Koenig, I think Ball does quite a cute trick here of making it seem like his experience with in Missing Link has given him some additional kind of level of consciousness and awareness that enables him to combat this, which is pretty good, a pretty good carry through and callback. And it all goes terribly wrong, of course, because Koenig is the one man who is resistant to these problems, even though he is tempted time and time and time again. And there is a guardian on the planet whose representative is another, naturally, it's 1970s, it's a hot babe. In this case, it's Catherine Schell, who of course would go on to be a series regular in season 2, playing the representative of the Guardian. And essentially the Guardian wants to keep everybody in a state of bliss and a state of perfection. But this is not a good thing, because of course everybody will give up their capability to make individual choices. There's a wonderful line where Koenig, when Helena's trying to treat a cut, he says, "No, leave it. My pain proves to me that I'm human," which is a really terrific line. But there's this discrepancy between the computer's readings and what Alan can tell from knowledge, skill and instinct about the Eagle's progress. By the time it all goes wrong, there's lots and lots of tension to be managed. There's more tension between Paul and Kano again. And this doesn't quite come off in the novel in the same way, but in the TV show, once again, Kano comes off like a real knobhead because he comes off like incredibly arrogant, smug, dismissive in his defense of the computer.
Right.
And this was weird to me because watching them in such short succession, as a kid, my number 2 behind Alan was Kano. I always loved Kano. I loved his suaveness and his confidence. I think the actor's got loads of charisma. But in these 2 episodes, it comes across as an absolute dick. But interesting additional characterization provided in the TV show. This thing about him undergoing experimental brain modification to interface with computers, that's not in the novel either,
No.
is it?
No, it's not at all.
So that's
we built it back into the omnibus, of course. We didn't want to lose that scene. And it's a crucial background point for his character going forward.
Yeah, and so this idea that there's an element of transhumanism being integrated into the law as well is absolutely fascinating. Particularly the detail that only 3 other people ever had this experimental brain modification, and all 3 of them had irreversible brain damage. So he was the only one who came through the procedure intact. So he's had quite a lot of brain trauma. Maybe that explains why he can be a bit of a pillock when someone spills coffee within 5 feet of him. Everything goes weird.
He is very much humbled when things really continue to go wrong. And then Koenig says to him, "Connor, I want to speak to you in my office." Yeah. And he doesn't, he keeps saying, "But we find no fault." And Koenig's like, that's not cutting it. Koenig doesn't want to ball him out, but he wants to convince him that, "I'm sorry, but this is not working. And we need to step things up to another level." And that's when he asks him to go through the procedure again. That's
one of the fascinating things about how they write Koenig. His man management in the novel, when he's telling everybody there's nothing out there, space is bleak, deal with it. I don't think they would have done that in the TV show. I think Martin Landau would have said, I'm not saying these words. These are terrible. This is a terrible thing for Koenig to say to his crew. Whereas in the series, he is portrayed as a decent manager of people and a good leader, but a good manager of people.
I've always felt that he's a really good portrayal of a leader, Koenig. Not so much necessarily year 2. They varied his character a lot, but in year 1, if I had to say, that's a leader, it would be his character.
I expect the conversation about how you revised season 2 to make that more consistent. It must have been an even bigger job than season 1, surely, because season 2 is all over the place, isn't it?
It's an interesting story in that when I proposed this to all 4 writers, Michael Butterworth said yes, but he said, "I want to do the writing. If the stories are going to be revised, I want to revise them," because he wanted to protect his work. And I said, "Wow, I'm great. That's even better." But I told him, I said, "But we're going to have to arranged the episodes because they're not in the right order. And the linking passages that you had created in that original order, of course, now don't work.
Yeah.
And I said to him, I want to build back in the scenes that weren't in the drafts that you were working from. And I reserved the right at the end to go through and make these little continuity references and connections so that it all holds together with the other books that we're publishing, plus the episodes of year one, which you're not necessarily familiar with, and our plans for the future. And he said, okay, I can do that. So he did a lot of the rewriting. And then I told him, I said, look, I want us to try to fill up any plot holes from the episodes and to make, not that he didn't do it, because he did it. I wanted the year two omnibus to have a more serious tone to match year one. And I think that in his books, he had already done that, but he was tied to, what the scripts he was given. And Michael Butterworth is a very imaginative person. He did the Hawkwind books, and
and Time of the Hawk Lords. We've covered that on this episode.
And so, one in Space Warp, he described it as like the love creature, and I think I took that out because it didn't seem to fit the tone. But other than that, his work is amazing. I said that to him when I was at his house. I said, what you did with the year two stories elevated them, made them really great. And he said, I can't help but think that you would have liked them no matter who wrote them because you're a fan of the series. And I said to him, I don't think that's true because I'm not necessarily a fan of all of the books that have been written, and the styles that were taken. I've grown to really appreciate E.C. Tugger's work, but when I was younger, I didn't particularly like it because I couldn't appreciate it. It was, he was taking the episode and saying, I'm going to make this better. And because he changed it, I felt it was the wrong thing to do, but that was because I was a kid. And whereas, Michael Butterworth, he made it believable, even when he was dealing with things that the episode plots made, they were unbelievable, and so anyway, that's how the Butterworth book came about.
I'm glad to read some of the Butterworth stuff on season 2 because I know I've said before, I'm not the biggest fan of season 2. I know there are some high spots, but on the whole, it's so different from season 1. It's like what we were talking about earlier on. It's like when stories are like repeated over and over and over again and people have different interpretations of legends and myth. To me, Space 1999 Series 2 doesn't feel like it's even set in the same universe or continuity as season 1. It's so different. It's a different thing. It's almost like somebody else came along, like, I don't know, someone else comes along and reboots Spider-Man or Batman or anything like that. Like you get in comics. We accept it in comics more, don't we? Somebody else comes along with a different take. Obviously things like Judge Dredd in 2000 AD, they do have continuity, and they've got continuity going all the way back to 1977 or 78, and the character ages in real time. But when it comes to a lot of comic characters, someone new comes along and they reinterpret the character. And season 2 of Space 1999 for me feels like a reinterpretation of the idea of Space 1999.
Oh, definitely. And Barbara Bain's performance as Helena Russell they're almost two different characters.
Yeah.
Helena Russell from season 1 and Helena Russell from season 2. It's hard to reconcile. I mean, and she was directed to do that. We want, I think one of the lines was that, Freddie Freiberger said, I want Helena Russell to be more like you are. And Barbara Bain is very, vivacious and expressive and funny and person. And, he wanted to build that humanity back into the character, where I was very pleased with her performance in year 1. She was professional, but at the same time, she was all wooden. Look at her reaction to Koenig's death, turning it off in Missing Link. That was not unemotional. It was just very realistic in its way. Didn't have to be long.
You get a glimpse of that in Guardian of Piri, don't you? When they're all being like disinhibited. Koenig makes it back to Moonbase after he has a 20-second long fight with Alan, which weirdly is different in the book, but we'll get to that. But he has this 20-second fight with Alan in an Eagle, Manages to knock Alan down and get away, but when he gets to Alpha, he's an absolute wreck due to his fight with Alan, which is absolutely brilliant, as is proper, of course. If you get into a fight with Alan, you should end up a fucked up mess. And in wrestling parlance, Koenig sells like fuck for Alan. When he gets back to Moonbase Alpha, he's an absolute mess. But he gets back, and they're all, like, they've all lost their inhibitions, they're all having a party. Bergman and Helena are chasing each other around one of the pillars. People are dancing, playing musical instruments. And you really see a very, very different Barbara Bain in those scenes, like, you know, playful. And she has a brilliant scene with Bergman when they're saying, well, we could just leave him here.
Right.
You know? And it's a fantastic scene between the two of them. Completely different type of interplay than we ever seen in any of the other episodes. It's terrific. So you really see her vivacious charisma come out just in those few spots. But you're absolutely right. She was playing a character. She was playing an astute professional. But when the moments for emotional connection came, she played them perfectly. Yeah.
I also like the scene between the two of them on the planet when at the end where he goes down and they're just lounging against one of those Pyrean trees and she goes, "Oh, look, it's John." And he goes, and Bergman goes, "Oh," you know, and like you can see the degradation of their characters into this sort of stupor.
Yeah.
And I think they sold it really, really well. And I don't know what the line is in the episode. I think I know what the line in the episode is. When he shocks her and she becomes she regains her sense of who she is. The first thing she says to him is, "Did my heart stop?" She has a medical diagnosis of why he would be giving her shock treatment. And I think it was amazing. Because she goes from this giddy character to really serious, like, you know, she realizes he's doing it for a purpose. And so she says to him, you know, did my heart stop?
Yeah. There are some quite key differences in the novelization, aren't there? We'll get to Helena in a moment, but it's Kano who gives Koenig a hell of a beating in the novelization. There's quite a wonderful passage where the Guardian's representative comes to them in like a forest. And it's a bit like a nymph in a forest in the Dying Earth stories or something. I really like the style of it. But it's also a little bit saucy. You know, there's like a description of Koenig gets a glimpse of a copper nipple, I think is how it's described, which makes her like alluring yet dangerous. I think Catherine Schell is absolutely fine in the TV episode, but there's something more mystical about the almost like Mythago Wood style about the novelization version. And also the bit where Koenig, so of course before Koenig gets to the planet in the novelization, he spends 3 days popping pills arguing with the computer in a cupboard, which I thought was absolutely wonderful. So they're all on this planet acting like a bunch of drugged up hippies, where he's actually taking drugs to stay awake to try and argue with the computer whilst rebuffing the advances from the Guardian's representative, who keeps saying it's got their best interests at heart and existence in a state of suspended bliss is theirs to be had. And it's terrific stuff. And it's stuff that is, once again, isn't in the TV version, probably for obvious reasons, because they've got a limited amount of time, but also because Brian Ball probably spends 50% more time, more page count on this episode in this book than he does on the others.
And it's just the opposite actually in the episode as aired, because in the novelization, he's taking pills to stay awake, sort of like Invasion of the Body Snatchers that they get you when you sleep. And in the episode, he's taking pills to keep himself asleep to resist, so that he can pass the time. They reversed it.
Yeah, I never thought of the Body Snatchers angle. Yeah, it's really good. It's good stuff. But he does go in the end with this plan, and it follows a roughly similar path. He uses an electrical resuscitation method on Helena to snap her out of it. But once again, it's a bit saucier in the novel than it is in the book, where she's in a robe which falls open, and he says, "Come with me." She said, "Well, all you needed to do was crook your finger," and a robe falls open, and he spots her boobs. It's all very, very saucy.
And when she wakes up from the shock, the first thing she does is she looks down and she covers herself.
Yes, that's right. That's right. Yeah. It's great stuff. And I mean, obviously, they both essentially end the same way. I mean, the novel ends very, very abruptly.
Right.
But
Page count.
Yeah, they get chased around for a while first, though. And the rest of the Alphans realise that he and Helena are not on the same wavelength as them and start to get a little bit aggressive. And in the TV show, some of the women are in, like, beachwear. Some of the men are stripped off to the waist, and they're getting chased around, including by topless Alan with a hairy chest, which I can't imagine. I think could anything be more abjectly terrifying than getting chased by hairy-chested, naked-topped Alan with a grudge against you? Or I suppose, depending on your viewpoint on the world, anything more exhilarating. But yeah, it's a real image. It's a real scene. But then he manages to overcome the Catherine Shell Guardian android thing, throws her back into the Guardian's portal, proves she's a computer. Everybody snaps out of it. They spot the moon is going out of orbit. Oh shit, we'll get back on the Eagles and get out of here. And then the novelisation just, like, bang, it just ends. It says, last paragraph. So we're trapped, sighed Bergman. Not while we have Moonbase Alpha. Come on, Koenig said. Let's go home. Now that the machines of the Pyrians are wrecked, there's nothing to hold the moon in orbit around Piri. Let's move, he called. The Alphans moved purposely towards the waiting Eagles. And I thought, is there a page missing out of my novelisation? Or is that literally the last page? And it is. It just ends. Like, Brian was like, right, done.
Right.
Scripts, send off, bam, done.
No epilogue, you know.
Yeah.
Because that last paragraph, I mean, just says what it functions for what it needs to do. It needs to tell you that the moon's going to get out of Earth's orbit and they have to evacuate as quickly as they can.
Yeah.
You know, The one thing that they did do in the novelization that Brian Ball did is you have this eagle suspended in midair.
Yeah.
Engines off, you know, and when the Guardian is destroyed, it continues its,
yes.
It crashes into the planet.
Yeah.
You know,
there is a lot of eagle porn in this episode, isn't there? I've got to say, you see tons of eagles at the same time. There's lots and lots of takeoff shots, which are always hugely enjoyable. And you also get the appearance of the special lab eagle with, like, the extra buttresses on the side of the module.
Right.
Oh, fabulous. I love the lab eagle. I mean,
yeah, I always thought that it was a year 2 thing, but it's not. They're in year 1.
Yeah, I did read in the unofficial guide that there are some inconsistencies and some of the eagles kind of change and swap places due to the way they were shot, but I never noticed anything because I'm just watching it going, eagles are cool. I fucking love eagles.
Oh yeah, it happens. There's sometimes it has that lab pod on the side, and yet when it lands on the pad, it doesn't have it. Or sometimes, you know, it lands, let's say, facing north, but when they exit, they're facing south. You know, they're clearly not exiting the side of the eagle that they need to be exiting to get to the pad. And these are these type of things. Because, you know, what happens is they film the special effects sequences separately based on whatever the script says. And, you know, and then they film the episodes of them actually leaving the eagle days before, days after. And so they don't always, not everything lines up. You know, these are just production errors, which we compensated for those because they created problems, you know, plot holes. But we realized it's just production stuff, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And you know what? I don't care because I'm watching Space 1999 in HD and looking at these spaceships and these planet vistas and all this business. And I'm just thinking, nothing looks better than this now. Nothing looks better than this in 2026. I don't know why. But no matter how advanced special effects get, and you can look at things like Star Trek Strange New Worlds or anything like that, I don't like the way the spaceships look. I don't like the way the Enterprise looks. Whereas I view this, and the model work is absolutely phenomenal. The moon-based stuff, the sets, everything they do with those, it's just absolutely terrific. Nothing looks better than it.
It's because practical models always look realer than CGI.
Yeah.
You know,
but there's a huge amount of technical craft in these that even for practical model making and filming, it really was absolutely tremendous work. Tremendous work. It's never been bettered, I don't think. Certainly not in a television show. Oh, it's absolutely wonderful. And when you think that if you rewatch Alien right now, and you watch the passing shot, the passing shot of the Nostromo, there are moments, even though that's a motion control shot and everything else, and probably using the same kind of technology and shooting techniques as Space 1999, it still doesn't look quite as clean and slick as some of the work in Space 1999. And I can't put my finger on why. I just can't put my finger on it. I think, is it Brian Thompson? What was his name? Brian Johnson. The guy was an absolute genius. There's no wonder he was tapped by Industrial Light and Magic, is there? Absolute genius. Yeah. So was there anything else you did for the Powys version of this story?
I certainly built in a lot more of the discussion between the servant of the Guardian and Koenig in terms of the backstory of Piri, because it doesn't play a large role in the episode as aired, but there is much more discussion between the two of them. I built in a lot of Brian Ball's description of the passages that you talked about where Koenig is spending days in isolation on the base. And I built back in that scene where Koenig punches the screen and bloodies his hand, and the servant tries to heal him, and he tells her, "No, leave my pain. It reminds me I'm human." Yeah. That wasn't in the original novelization. But I did like the fact that I had noticed writing the omnibus that Koenig had these injured ribs. And it was like a thing that the writers kept going back to. And then I thought, okay, so when she heals him, I mean, in the episode, it's an arm. She heals his arm and the ribs. And so I think we can finally be done with that, So it kind of tied in a bunch of stories. We got that fixed. I'm sure that someone wanted me to make some sort of Maya reference to Catherine Schell, either in year 2, she looks like the Guardian, the servant of the Guardian, or the Guardian, these type of things. But no, we didn't do that.
That'd have been too on the nose, wouldn't it?
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
The one other thing I think I came to a realization yesterday, reading through the omnibus, and I realized that clearly in the episode, there's no reference to Koenig learning the mental skills from Zeno, nor how it helps him in this episode, but it does make it into the omnibus and into Ball's work. But I realized that when Ram says his fear of my experiments caused him to manifest these nightmare creatures, that was really an instance where Koenig had created reality with his mind. And I had never picked up on that before. It was an example of him actually being able to do what she had told him that he would eventually be able to do.
There's one tiny reference to it in the novelization where it says only when Koenig was near the tower was the insidious radiation from the Pyrian's machines strong enough to overcome his Zenite powers. One moment the tower was grim and black, a great tombstone to the memory of the Pyrians, and then it became a radiant white beacon, an invitation to a new life. So that's the one explicit reference to him having picked up some kind of, gnarly power from his experience on Zeno. Yeah.
As a kid, I was fascinated by the idea of this episode that perfection means a lack of change. And so that what the Guardian would do is he would slow down time for each individual until they were done. They couldn't age. Not one, but in a sense they were dead. Because they're for them, time had stopped.
Yeah.
Absolutely stopped.
So, if we're thinking this in sort of Moorcockian terms, from all the books that we cover in terms of it being a Moorcockian podcast, it's very much like an expression of one of the concepts in some of the books by Moorcock where law is like the ultimate expression of stagnation. And whilst the want all of the Alphen crew to exist in a state of perpetual bliss and stasis and not for nothing to change, the removal of any unpredictability, any chaos, any self-choice, any individuality, it's like the ultimate expression of a lawful society, where law has gone to an extreme, and that's almost as bad or as bad as an ultimate form of chaos where life can't exist for a protracted period of time because everything is constant change. So it's like opposite sides of the balance. So yeah, there's like a Moorcockian element to this as well. Yeah. Well, it's quite interesting, isn't it? Because we've had Moorcockian elements, we've had Lovecraftian elements, we've had all sorts. Just goes to show that all these concepts of storytelling ideas are almost universal, aren't they? And they're shot through all of sci-fi, and Space 1999 loves these kind of philosophical arguments and conundrums. And
I think,
best.
All credit to Johnny Byrne, but these writers, Christopher Penfold wrote Guardian of Piri, Johnny Byrne wrote Force of Life, and Edward De Lorenzo wrote Missing Link. These people were reading other people's work. They were reading science. Johnny Byrne read science fiction, so he was aware of other people's work. Not that he was copying people's work, but concepts that people were playing with, he got a chance to play with as well. I mean, his script for Mission of the Darians is basically a generational ship being sent out, and it's being done. Where there's always some accident and then the people don't know they're on a ship. Yeah. And that was the same thing with, well, some of the people didn't know in Mission of the Darians, but, the Star Lost, which came later from, Harlan Ellison, and then, I think Heinlein wrote one of those as well. Yeah. Big generational ship. These ideas were out there. So, they put them into episodes.
Yeah. I love Mission of the Darians. I think it's fantastic. I think, if you were to ask me on any given day of the week, I'd probably give you different answers as to which my favourite Space 1999 episode was. But on at least one of those days, it would be Mission of the Darians. And at least one day a week, it would be, I forget the name of it, but it's the one where Peter Bowles is a mad
End of Eternity
with his horrific paintings inside his asteroid. Absolutely adore that episode. And it's another interesting episode from a British perspective, because Peter Bowles, who plays the villain, is best known in the UK for playing like softly spoken, gentle comedic characters.
Right.
Like particularly in a series called To the Manor Born.
Right. So very, very, very popular here as well.
Yeah. So going back and watching that, and number one, him not having a mustache or a bowler hat and being this huge, powerful, evil villain. Oh, terrific.
I'll tell you an anecdote. When I first met Johnny Byrne here in Los Angeles, I said to him, why don't you come? We'll have breakfast in the morning. We'll take you to a Mexican restaurant, very famous one, biscuit not here anymore. And he said, I want to make sure I can fulfill my commitments to the convention. They said, what time do you need me? And they said, well, we're really only going to need you till 1. He said, okay, let's go. So we went, and I went with some friends of mine, who don't know anything about Space 1999, and so we're at this restaurant, and they're teaching him how to eat with tortillas, where you don't use a fork or spoon, you eat it with a tortilla. Yeah. And Johnny Byrne makes a joke, of course, that goes over everybody else's head, and he says, I'm as hungry as a Darien. I could eat my own grandmother.
Brilliant.
And my friend looks at him like, what does he mean by that?
Terrific. Actually, last time we spoke, I think you were only like a month out from a Space 1999 convention.
Oh, yes.
How did that go?
It went well. I was just there to sell books. I set up a table and I sold a fair amount of books, and it was interesting. I got a chance to speak with some people, some fans that I had never met in person before. Yeah. And that was a lot of fun. I didn't get a chance to participate in a lot of the panels or go to a lot of the things because I had to work the table.
Right. Okay.
So, that was kind of the thing, but I'd done conventions before, and, I got a chance to move a number of copies of Year One. So that was good.
Yeah. Well, you know what, before we finish, I've just realized we didn't rate Guardians of Piri. What's your rating?
I think of the 3, I would give it a lower rating, maybe a 4, because I also think it's an episode that holds up well. There's no really embarrassing parts or parts that don't make any sense or plot holes. I think it holds up really, really well. I think at the top of, I had to rate the 3, 1 to 3, it would be Force of Life. I really like Missing Link. Mm-hmm. And then it would be Guardian of Piri. And yet they're all, it's surprising. If you look at the episodes of Year One of Space 1999, and you had to say, okay, this is a good episode, this is terrible, they're all really good. There's only 1 or 2 that you might people don't like, a lot of people don't like Ring Around the Moon, although it's steeped in, atmosphere. The ending doesn't make it's the usual James Kirk confusing the computer and it blows itself up type ending, which is its weak point. And the one where they turn into cavemen, it's kind of, the episode does not really give you an idea about what's really happening. And then it's ruined, in my opinion, is when they go through the mist and they turn back into their modern selves. They're wearing their modern clothing again, rather than the skins that they were wearing before. Why would the clothing change? Why would everybody's hair come out perfectly coiffed? When we wrote the omnibus, we changed it. They came back out, all straggly and filthy and with their robes, but their modern minds, we're like, why am I dressed like this? That's what takes those two episodes down. But the rest I think are really, and the second episode, Matter of Life and Death, the one where Helena meets her husband and, the planet is made of antimatter. I feel that, it was written by Art Wallace to be a story where illusions, your fears would be made manifest. And then Johnny Byrne was asked, no, this is not going to work. Rewrite it. And he didn't have a lot of time and he rewrote it and it's very well acted, but ultimately it's one of those just, it was all just a dream sort of reset episodes. And I think those are probably the three weakest, but the rest it's really consistently good. First season.
I think it's majority 4 and 5. For me, this one is 4 comlocks and 1 hairy chest, I think. But yeah, it's that there are a couple of weaker ones, but even when they're weaker, they're still worth a watch. But
so if you had to rate the 1, 2, 3 of these episodes, which would you do?
I'd be in exactly the same order as you. It would be Force of Life number 1, Missing Link number 2, and this number 3.
Yeah.
So even though I've rated this and Missing Link 4 comlocks out of 5, it's only because I probably should have gone out of 10. So I could go 7 for one and 8 for the other, or 8 or 9, whatever. I think maybe Missing Link would have been a 9, but Force of Life is definitely a 10. Yeah.
If I have one regret, it's come to me recently. You never know. You don't think about the future and your opportunities becoming limited. But I had many talks with Johnny Byrne. I was there, as I think I said, when he was in his last few weeks of life. I went to sit by his bedside basically like a week before he passed away, and I was there for a week. And I had a lot of talks with Christopher Penfold. He wrote the foreword to one of our books and afterward to the sequel book.
Yeah.
And I shared a lot of music with him that I had done. And so we talked about things, but we didn't really talk about Space 1999, nor did I really do so with Johnny Byrne. We became friends and we talked about other things, And so there are a lot of questions that now I have no opportunity to ask them. What were you thinking about when you wrote this? And what were you thinking about when you wrote that? And what was your idea behind this? Because the last thing I wanted to do as a friend was start doing all these fanboy questions. And so, I just put those things to one side. And I didn't ask those questions, even though I had these doubts in my mind. I just thought, no, it's not appropriate,
Yeah.
I mean, if we were to meet in person, say you come to LA with Phil and we're visiting, I would think that we would talk about life.
Yeah, we wouldn't be talking about Space 1999.
Yeah, exactly. I went to a convention I was there with Robert Sheckley and Harlan Ellison's agent. I don't know exactly his role. We were talking and people came coming up to us and saying, oh, could you sign this? And oh, could you do? And our conversation would have to stop. And then they would, then the person would leave. And then we would be able to continue our conversation because we weren't talking about Spanish things.
Yeah.
And so it became I realized what it was like to be on the other side. I remember one time I was in a bookstore in Barking, like a Doctor Who shop in London. And I was sitting at a table with Andrew Cartmel and Sylvester McCoy. And I had just published Andrew Cartmel's Prisoner novel. And he had written a book called Script Doctor about his time as being in charge of Doctor Who. And Sylvester McCoy was there to, he had written the foreword to Andrew's book and was signing the book too. And people asked me for a signature to sign Andrew's Prisoner book. And I was like, and of course I had, Rupert Booth and Jonathan Blum's book with us there. Actually, we didn't have Andrew's book there yet. We had Rupert's book there. Andrew was just was beginning to write it. So I was there. He said, "Oh, come along, we'll do this thing." And, so I was there at the table with the three of them. And every time they came to get the Prisoner book, they asked me to sign it. And I was thinking, why in the world would you want my signature on this book? I'm nobody, So as a fan, I found it very, very difficult to understand. And yet later on, when I became, in a sense, well known within a certain fandom, I realized I was now on the other side of the fence. To a certain extent. I'm nobody, but it was weird.
You mentioned a couple of interesting things there, actually. One is Sheckley. We're a Sheckley fan podcast as well. We've done a couple of Sheckley books over the years, but also next podcast I record is about Thomas M. Dish's Prisoner novel. So that's a little bit of synchronicity that you finish off talking about Andrew Cartmell's Prisoner novel, because we'll be delving into Thomas M. Dish's somewhere along the line soon. So, yeah. Well, you know what? What a treat to have you back to talk about your work on the Space 1999 stuff once again, and to talk about The Space Guardians by Brian Ball, because I really enjoyed it. So thank you.
Got me going back and read them all again.
Well, I think what I need to do is buy that lectern so I can trench my way through year one. So, but anyway, thanks, Mateo. It's absolutely lovely to see you again, and we'll get something in, I'm sure, for the future.
Good talking to you. You take care.
Many thanks to Mateo once again for dropping by Derry Toms and for the further books he sent me. After all these years, I can finally discover the fate of Professor Victor Bergman. One thing I should have reinforced to Mateo is just how incredible I think the feat is that he and his colleagues like William Latham and Patricia Sokol, amongst others, with Powys Media, in producing such an amazing body of work in relation to not only Space 1999, but The Prisoner too. More on that in a future episode. If you're listening, Mateo, incredible job. You should be very proud. And I'm so pleased that we managed to make contact and take that opportunity to talk about all of this. These kinds of connections are amongst the true pleasures of doing this podcast. We'll do it again, I'm sure, at some point in the future. But in the meantime, thanks as ever to our glorious patrons. First, those without tier: Anthony Piconti, Tim Cardos, Dave Dempster, and Sebastian Weetabix. And our chaos engineers: Andrew Clark, Andrew Cicluna, Andrew Spong, Anthony Porter, Benjamin Fletcher, Ben Hagar, Brandon Mays, Dan Charnley, Dave F., Dave Griffiths, Dave Voxman, Gabriel Laycock, Harvey Faulkner-Aston, Jim Kirkland, Jim Jupp, John W. Lays, Jules Lawrence, Mal Pertwee, Matt Saltz, Michael Hopwood, Neil McGurk, Paul McRandall, PJ Cooper, Rex Ossius Nusquam, Roger McCarthy, Scott Butler, Simon Perrins, Steve Braun, Steve Luke, and, new to our good ship Don Blas, Stephen Sowerby. Thanks for coming aboard, Stephen. And of course, thanks to our crafty Jugaderos, Ed Von Storr, Adrian Tchaikovsky, Alexander Harris, Andrew Van Ness, Kathy Rhubarb, Chris Sharp, Christian Hundal, Emily Thompson, James Connell, Graham Holden, James Knight, Kevin Williams, Liam Turner, Lone Hugo, Loz, Mark Butley, Mark Hewlett, Mark Taylor, Matthew Broom, Murray Palmer, Nick Hopkinson, Arthur Ziv, Ritsby Skits, Sean Twist, Toby White, Taylor Lavery, and, joining us at the tables of multiversal chance, Jake Patton. May fate deal you a favourable hand. And eternal thanks to our patron demons: Action Edmonds, Alistair Davison, Andy Darby, Brian Henderson, David Lee, Derek Clunan, Fred Keish, Gareth Wilson, Glenn Sawyer, Greg Faulkner, Gwen Barlow, Ian Stead, Jenny Stim, Jason Vogel, Jem Gilbert, Joachim Sund, Joe Monty, Johan Hiarper, Jonathan Sharp, Lee Gary, Liam Jones, Marius Latauskas, Mark Hebden, Miles Reed-Labato, Neil Burton, Paul Hillary, Randall Gatlin, Steve Round, Tom Murphy, Tone Malazzo, the OG patron, Norman Beresford, and last but never least, rebuilding his house in the Azores, Robert Macmillan. Don't forget you can follow us on Instagram and Blue Sky with the handle @BreakfastRuins. You can email us at breakfastruins@outlook.com. The webpage is breakfastintheruins.com. BITR Breakfast in the Ruins Radio is live on Radio Garden or at the web player at breakfastintheruinsradio.blogspot.com. And we have our Patreon page too, of course, and a few extra odds and sods on there. But until next time, wherever you are in the world, take care, stay safe, and we will meet again soon on the Moonbeam Roads.